as well. We're privileged to have you here. We thank you so much for taking the time. I'm so glad that you came in my small peer group. We are not too many. Generally, your talks are more than 1,000 people at the time, but it is important that academics that have a great impact to others understand. And I agree that teachers have no answer at all. It's good to share with their students, and this is like what I love as a teacher, to share and to say that, okay, I don't know this, I will search, we will search together, we will find it, if there is something to be found. Thank you so much. Stay with us or wherever. I know that you have a great deal to do and more people to impact, and this is why we thank you so much.
My pleasure, Margaret. Again, appreciate the invite here. It's always a pleasure. It's not about numbers. If I can make a little impact that allows you to make a bigger impact, then those ripples of contribution will touch shores that none of us can see. And that's worth being able to spend time here now. Sadly, I won't be able to join the rest of the time here. I do have a tight schedule, but I did want to carve out time to come see you guys and say, again, I appreciate the honor of the invitation. Go enjoy the rest of your day and stay amazing.
Thank you so much. Stay amazing as well. Okay, and we continue our travel now with our amazing Evangelos, who is going to refer to a floating university, one of his dreams of a lifetime. And I'm so glad to have Evangelos with us, an authentic person, 100%, that has traveled a lot and has a lot of experiences all around the world that can share as well his inspiration and inspire us, because we need to be inspired and we need to have some answers, even if these answers is yet to discover. Evangelos.
Unmute. Thank you very much for this introduction. I just asked Luis how I can get my PowerPoint.
You can send it to me. Send it to me on the chat, and I will slide out the PowerPoint if you want to.
Wait.
You can
send it to you
by the chat. There's a option to send the file. And
yes.
I will see the file and I will open it and I will slide it from my computer.
Okay. Just 1 second, please.
Yeah, no problem. Just a reminder that all the sessions are being recorded, and there will be a possibility after maybe next week or 2 weeks to make a post-production and to have a full complete session of each session. So don't worry, everything is being recorded from the beginning to the end.
Have you sent it, Evangelos?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it in my universe of files.
In the meantime, I would like to say that I would like to thank you all for being here, and each of you add a special value in this workshop and in this we are doing today, because we impact each other. So it's very, very important to share positivity. And of course, we don't have all the answers. But I don't know, until now, I'm greatly inspired with all the day, and I'm waiting to be inspired more by the rest of the presenters and Evangelos now as well.
Okay, so I just received the presentation. Give me maybe 2 minutes by the time I open it and share my screen. I think.
Sure. Well, maybe I can start
You can
with,
start, yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
not a self-presentation, that too, but basically a brief introduction to that dream of my life that Margarita mentioned. I'm in close cooperation with a particular group in Indonesia, in Java, and have been going there before the pandemic for lectures and cooperation on other different issues, training and so on. And there we are. And what really impressed me was Indonesia's nature, including the nature of its people, the thousands of islands, the size of Java, with literally hundreds of millions of inhabitants on one island, its history, and so forth. And because my group, my friends there, the people I cooperate with are strong activists, one of my old ideas manifested itself again in the Javanese and Indonesian context. Very briefly, I made a presentation in Surabaya along similar lines to the one here today. And it was about a floating university, floating archipelagic university for solidarity and sustainability. If you are familiar with Indonesia, you know that it's right on the fire, what do you call it, on the area in the Pacific and Earth's crust, which is very unstable. So practically every week, somewhere in Indonesia, you have volcanoes exploding, you have earthquakes, you have tsunamis, you have all sorts of disasters. And my friends, the Penele, go as volunteers to help wherever there is such a disaster. Now, my idea of the floating university was precisely to facilitate their going to wherever there is a specific need. Right now, they do it usually with Air Force transport planes. But I thought that one could combine very, very tightly learning, teaching, community work, and assistance to those who need it during disasters, and not only, so that they could travel around the archipelago, learning and offering their services at every level, including training local people in different skills. Another idea I had and presented at a conference in Bali, I gave it a name from Greek mythology, the Prometheus Project, not fire, but research. How one can bring to the broader community, from farmers to fishermen to small businessmen, the skills of research thinking, analytical thinking, critical thinking. And that I also combined with my proposal for the floating archipelagic university there. So having gotten that that idea, for a number of reasons, it just did not well, I wouldn't say did not take off, but it did not leave the port. And when I came back to my context in Greece, through work that I did again for my Peneleh Indonesian friends, co-activists, I conceived of starting this as an archipelagic university for the Mediterranean, where solidarity among all of us around this ancient habitat, solidarity and caring for each other and using the opportunity of caring for each other as a learning context for young people. That's what gave me the idea of a floating university for SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the UNESCO 17 goals with a time target of 2030. And that is what I have brought here. My hope was that this workshop could be an opportunity to apply one of my teaching learning approaches, project-based learning, introspection through reflective diaries and so on, but I could use the opportunity of this workshop to tap into perspectives, opinions, and perceptions of colleagues. I contacted a very large number of former associates, former students, and so on, but I'm not quite sure if and how they are joining this event. Many dozens responded positively, but I don't know if they are here. Okay, next. That was the first guideline, because what I said was breaking the workshop participants first, starting, next one, Luis. Okay, so we did the introduction and the introduction of me and the topic. And what the next task I was hoping could have been was brainstorm on key issues. And key issues, I don't want to disclose what I have basically jotted down as key issues, but what do you, as the participants, think would be key issues? So a kind of group discussion, focus group discussion. The next, and of course, the times that I have put there correspond to my original perception of what this would be like. The next is if the participants could break down into teams depending on the particular issues, have brief presentations by each team, and then end with an integrative discussion. Well, this was the original idea. I look at my clock here and it doesn't seem, how to put it, totally feasible, but let's try anyway. Now, how do we go into an interactive focus group discussion? Do we have the corresponding tools here? We have, because
yeah,
I find that, yeah.
So I think it's if Louis breaks us into breakout rooms, that will be easy to do.
Yeah, of course. How many rooms do you want, Evangelos?
Well, let's say maybe 4.
Okay, I will try to have 4. So there will be a 4-room. Everyone is willing to go. Either everyone is going into his own room, or I can break out the room automatically. So there will be, let's say, 5 per room. Okay, just give me. Okay, so there will be
Luis,
yes.
Before we break up into 4 or 5 or 3 rooms or whatever,
Yeah.
I would like to have some feedback, but in this way, not through the chat necessarily. I find it a bit distracting. What do you believe are, let's say, 4 important issues to deal with in starting out this project? What would be 4 important issues to launching, pardon the pun, to launching this floating university? Fotini?
I'll unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I was thinking when you were talking, Evangelos, there are many issues to consider, and also linking it back to Peter Sage and Michael's presentation about context. I think context is extremely important, and learning to adapt and cooperate. And also linking it back to Peter Sage's input on frame of mind, the friendly frame of mind, is what we think a university looks like and what we think it's possible and what it is for. I think we need to change a way of thinking of what it looks like, what is an institution looks like. And think differently, that it is possible to create that floating university and go to the communities, which brings me to the next point. I think that this is the other point I wanted to make on the fact that I personally like the idea of not institutionalizing the situation that you're coming into university and we're going to teach you something specific because we are who we are. But actually this idea of floating university is actually taking university to the people, to the communities who are there. And I like that adaptation. A few years ago, when I first met Margarita, and we had the opportunity to meet face to face with a colleague from Africa, and she was discussing how difficult it is. And that made me, I will show the connection, because I think in situations like this, a floating university would have been perfect. The problem that they had is that people couldn't have the means of transport to actually get to university. I remember that very, very vividly. And the fact that there were also in Africa, there is, and in many other parts of the world, but specifically this example, because the lady was from Africa and living with the tribes where family is very important, and people don't want to leave the family to go to university. It's also, I think, a social and cultural phenomenon that I personally very much respect. And the idea of going to such a context where family and the idea of living together is such an important part of society, and not taking them out of that society, I think it's really, really important. So yeah, so these issues of culture, transfer of what an institution looks like and going to the communities, I think it's very important.
Yeah. Let me add 2-3 more details. During my presentation for the floating university, the archipelagic one in Java, in Surabaya, I gave part of my presentation an autoethnographic sort of chapter by going back and seeing the significance of the sea, islands, and sailing in my own life. And truly, my first boat trip was when I was 3 years old. I'm 78 now, so it was 75 years ago. And it was also an incredible coincidence because it could have been fatal and my last trip. The boat on which we were supposed to travel refused to receive us. We had to go from Thessaloniki down to Piraeus, Athens, okay? And it was full. My mother, who was an extraordinary woman, very, well, Margarita also, she went to the commander of the police, the gendarme, the Chorophylaki in northern Greece, okay? And asked him to intervene and get us on the boat to Athens. He did. We got on the boat, and the next boat went down. It was the boat Himara, who went through the Euboean Gulf, sank, and something like 300 people were drowned. Okay, so this shows my bond with the sea. Subsequently, in the 70s, I taught on a floating university out of California to all of Latin America through the Magellan Straits, up the Atlantic coast of Latin America, West Africa, Senegal, Morocco, and got into the Mediterranean about a month after the invasion of Cyprus. Again, very powerful events in addition to the direct experience of going out. And in fact, the courses that I taught were on anthropology, sociology of language, development of national languages, decolonization, and so on and so forth. And that stuck with me. And now I'm on the side of planning and wanting to create one that would be very different, because that was a private university. It had a general curriculum, but what I want to do now in the Mediterranean is precisely what I said before, a university that will serve the people of the Mediterranean, the people especially who need help, okay? Now, just a diversion, exploring some of the things that you touched on, I did the sort of, I applied the classical instruments of entrepreneurship and starting new businesses, PESTO and SWOT. PESTO, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental analysis of the situation, okay? What is the outcome of doing a PESTO for a floating university in the Mediterranean right now? I'll just stop with the political. It's a mess. Do you see what I mean? So, and when I looked back, because again, for my Peneleh friends in Indonesia, I gave a paper on today's tensions in the context of East-West conflict to the beginning, when I realized that the Trojan War was probably the first case of conflict between East and West. Okay. So what does that tell us? That for 4,000 years, we have had conflict, endemic, basically, in the Mediterranean. But that did not stop the Mediterranean from being really a cooking pot of contacts, ideas, solidarity, exchange, learning. Okay, and that's the very positive side of this. Okay. Economic, that's also extremely interesting. And I think in one of the sessions that I'm chairing, Chinese friends are talking about the Silk Road. They don't mention the Belt and Road Initiative, okay, the Silk Road and its impact on the Mediterranean. So do you see what I mean? Issues
Yes.
in there of an economic and other nature are very much alive as they were 4,000 years and beyond ago.
But I agree with that. But but I also think that the people that are involved in the process of instruction, of teaching, of learning, isn't it the ultimate goal, the cooperation? Yes, I mean, we all come with the baggage of wherever we are geographically and whatever tensions this has created over time and over history. I'm actually reading the book right now on the Silk Road and alternative history, and I exactly see what you mean about the impact of the East to the West. But still, you know, thinking about that we are, what is the purpose of teaching to the communities? I think we can learn a lot from them culturally, rather than also, you know, having, I guess, if I can call it, distractions that we cannot control. It's how we interpret it, in a sense, isn't it, in the end?
Distractions, not distraction. Right.
Not distraction, but distractions in the sense that this is not the purpose, it's something we cannot change. The history we cannot change. The situation, what happened, we cannot change that, but we can change how we interpret this, how we use that information.
Exactly. That's what I was going to comment. Now, let me add another dimension of how the field work, if you want to call it that, or the experiential learning, to put it in educational terms, or action, teaching, and learning, to use the terminology, the concepts of Scott Plous. I discovered Scott Plous many years ago. And when I came back to his work in the context of my floating university, I was amused by the wordplay. His name meaning, you know, sailing in Greek, connected it to one of the Alexandrine works that I find extremely interesting as a man who has worked a lot in Asia and the Pacific. If you're familiar with it, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. It was written by one of the people of the Ptolemaic group in Alexandria, and it describes precisely sailing through the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean over to India. And in many ways, it's a practical piece of labor that inspires also my view of the floating university. So I'm constructing a master list of organizations which are working on different issues that correspond to the 17 SDGs of UNESCO. I'll mention a couple. Yesterday, I was corresponding with Solomon, okay, a group here in Greece that works on issues of equality, even gender equality, supporting people who are at a disadvantage, and so on. I'm in correspondence with the person who is running Archipelago, okay? And they're working on sea pollution, the destruction of our Aegean environment, for instance, through plastics. So these two examples, but more. The Greens are doing an elaboration on issues that are very, very striking right now for us in Greece. For instance, aeolic power, okay, wind mills for the generation of electricity, but very often at the cost of Natura areas in Greece. Okay, so you destroy the forest in order to save on electricity. Okay, it's almost a bit like cutting down the forest and burn to generate, power. So what I'm trying to say right now is that I have identified a very large number of organizations, NGOs also, which already work on many of the issues of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, and the teaching and learning on the floating university would directly link up with these groups and provide, expertise for field work and field learning of our students. Of course, the Mediterranean includes quite a large number of nations. I'm making contacts with them, but I don't have as much of a knowledge and insight into, for instance, what happens in Tunisia, Morocco, and so on and so forth. Okay.
Is it time for the room?
Well, do we have? Okay, Fotini, can you sort of give the title of a room, a topic?
Okay. I think the last comment you made, Evangelos, on linking the issues on the Mediterranean and sustainability, would that be something that you would be happy with, the theme in terms of what are the issues that we face in the Mediterranean? So issues and sustainability.
Okay, so basically identification of the priorities of issues to be dealt with.
Yeah, because they link them.
Selection, yeah.
Yeah.
So identification and selection of the most important of the SDGs. Mm-hmm. The priority, okay? So Luis, we can have a room for that, right?
Okay, so there's one room, identification and selection of SDGs.
And nevertheless, we have 15 minutes left, huh?
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
what's
so
that compared to eternity, 4,000 years?
Okay, that is one room.
Okay. Any other ideas from our friends here?
Can I add one more? Because I think that what inspires your thinking is a lot to do with sailing and the sea. And maybe, what do we think, floating university actually means for different people, because we're all from different backgrounds. And I think it would be nice to see the interpretation of that concept.
Okay. So let's see. The idea of the concept of a floating university. Is that it?
Yeah, something like that, because I think since we're all from different backgrounds and how we conceive the idea of floating and communities, I think it's really interesting.
Okay, let me just, sorry, Margarita, I'm abusing my role of workshopper. But one of the things that I have been concerned with, for instance, you may have followed what is happening in Venice with a super duper ocean liners, the tourist ones that visit and completely disrupt local life. Okay. So my dilemma is, it's not actually a dilemma, it's two sides of the issue. Should one optimize this floating university idea by using as the one that I taught on, this was about 20,000 tons, okay? Using ocean liners where the whole body of students and teachers are, and it goes from one place to the next, or rather break it down into small to medium size boats, like the ones that go connect Greek islands, for instance, okay, so that you have different ones going even to small islands with no big facilities, okay, with a port that can only accommodate smaller boats, which you would miss otherwise if you only go around in a large ocean liner. And then they can be sort of designed either by specific SDGs or some other way.
Yeah. So the nature of the floating university and the means that we use.
The physical, the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Any more? Any?
Just a question. What will be the title of this room?
Sorry, Luis.
What will be the title of the room we just discussed about? Because we have one room, identification and selection of SDGs.
Yeah.
There's a second room, which is the name. Which name will be?
Physical infrastructure of the facilities.
Okay, physical infrastructure.
But Evangelos, we will have the time to make, because in 10 minutes, I don't think, maybe a brainstorming session like we had discussed, it would be, like Fotini now, you are brainstorming with ideas, and because to make different rooms, it would be better to do it.
The next one.
No.
We learn from today.
Okay.
Anyone else? Sten, I see you are quiet, and you come from a maritime nation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Denmark. And we used to be pretty big and still are, actually. We are the biggest in container traffic by sea. So you're right. But what I'm a little in doubt about right now is what's the framework of the floating university? I mean, do you want people on board a ship and then have them discussing, teaching, or giving good ideas, or for a week, for 10 days, or a month? Or yeah, I mean, like a university, there's some kind of semester plan.
Well, I don't even think of things like semester and so on and so forth, even though one would have to organize it temporarily as well. I have a list in my files of all the ports I would like to visit. And taking the whole Mediterranean, even though it's the Mediterranean and not the world as some of the other existing floating universities do, basically the people of organizations we work with on specific ports, islands or mainland, okay. Let's say Palermo, even though for Palermo we would need permission from the mafia, but we can also ask for funding.
It's in Calabria where you'll find the strongest mafia type and the most money.
Pardon my...
And by the way, I mean, it's just a little anecdote and time is running out. The Vikings were actually not plundering and raping and doing all those things. They came from the Viking age from around 600-700 to around 1100 before our era. And they settled there. They were immigrants. They came with the cattle and the whole families. So the main port, do you know the biggest Viking port was Dublin, Ireland?
Say it again, where?
Ireland, Dublin was the main
port
for the Vikings. And they were actually, you could call them economic refugees or political refugees. So it's the same pattern, a little like it. And carrying with them knowledge about agriculture and everything. So it was a teaching university in itself.
Yeah. You have opened another chapter on all of this. Yeah.
A little comment on the Silk Road. It's a strong political problem and economic problem also, as you probably know, that China is trying, like in Africa, to take over the infrastructure wherever they can, and strongly so, also by sea and by land, like the Silk Road. By the way, there were 4 or 5 Silk Roads by sea when the main one was from Beijing, Peking to Venice almost.
Yeah, as I said, I looked into that, and there are quite a few cases and a lot written about this kind of travel for commercial purposes. One is the Periplus that I mentioned by the Greeks. There are subsequent works. And you had, for instance, the Chinese came down to Java and had a very big impact.
The road by sea, but they were free for other ones by sea. But it is a very sensitive political question. That was my point. And so is actually anything you'll do in the Mediterranean because of the immigration from Africa to Europe. So there's a major problem there, and political instability in most of the Maghreb countries.
Yeah, I mean, you have almost 1/3 of the countries which are directly or a bit farther away from the Mediterranean are at war. So,
Evangelos, you have 5 minutes left, huh?
Yes, I have the big clock right in front of me, Margarita.
I'll rest my case for now.
Thank you, Sten.
It sounds interesting, and you've done a lot of work for a lifetime. I understand.
55 years of teaching, Sten.
Evangelos Fotini would like to raise the hand.
Yeah, sorry, I've raised the hand as you were talking, and I was thinking, I wanted to ask, because obviously as an educator myself, I cannot help myself but thinking about the content of the sessions, let's say, that you would teach in a floating university, and whether you would tailor it to the communities or to the issues surrounding the communities. How have you conceptualized the content of the teaching that you are planning for the different communities?
Okay, very quickly, let me reply by going back to 1974 when I taught issues like national language development to replace colonial languages and so on and so forth. I had identified language planning centers, national language planning centers. For instance, in Peru, the indigenous languages. And I took my students there, okay? And we had presentations by the staff of these centers. Senegal was a very interesting case of this also. And we went to the place for that. There was also an anthropologist, a Brazilian, who had been doing field work in Senegal. And she also contributed, the perspective of the role of French and its gradual replacement by local languages, which was tricky, to say the least. And of course, similar things in Morocco. We spend a lot of time in Morocco and so on. Incidentally, I should not forget, as a parenthesis, to mention one thing, that here in the Mediterranean, the northern part, and Europe, and in Greece specifically, we have this negative, quite widespread, but not everybody, attitude to refugees and migrants. The interesting thing is that part of my experience in 1974 around Latin America and West Africa was that I ran into so many Greek refugees. Greek refugees in a small town in the south of Latin America, okay? Punta Arenas. In Punta Arenas, small town, a bit like cowboy towns, okay? One main street and 2 rows of buildings on either side. I arrived there with the hundreds of students visiting from the boat. I looked to the left and there is, a Greek name on the grocery store. Okay, the other side, Kritikos. Okay, I arrived in the first Sahara town after crossing the Atlas Mountains with a Greek name, incidentally. And in a small town, which has become a love of movie makers later, to the left, Chez Dimitris. Okay, so Chez Dimitris, again, the grocery of the town, and across the street, big hotel, big for the small town, 3 stories by his brother. So just wanted to make that point and how important it is and what kinds of experiences and learning one can have by traveling and going into the local situation.
Of course, thank you so much. Evangelos, if you start speaking, I know that you have so many experiences.
You can't turn me off.
And things to share, that we will respect the time, yes, because it's very tiring, and we respect all the people that participate. So we will stop for 20 minutes, and at 1:20 Greek time, we have the active audience participation session. So it's a test. We will have to have lunch together and try to speak about the importance of sharing and interaction amongst our students. So this is very important question, and we will see